panelists right now for our next panel, and that is talking about what's happening in our business today. So I see Mark and the rest of the panelists coming on up. So as many, excuse me, as many of you, you know in this room, the traditional business model for racing has really been shaken up. Revenue streams that we all counted on, we can no longer count on. Things are changing in dramatic ways. This panel brings together a number of different folks from a number of different jurisdictions that are facing these challenges, and they're going to teach us the lessons that they've learned. So Damon's going to take their seat. Mark is moderating. This is no longer an American story, though. Just last week, our Canadian friends, it was just announced, are losing a racetrack, Hastings Park, that has raced since 1889 because of the decision of the British Columbian government to, or Columbia government to end subsidies for the racetrack. So we feel for our friends, our Canadian friends up there. It's really tough for everybody, but let's hear from this group now about how our industry can move proactively forward with our changing business model. Mark, take it away.
All right, thank you, Robert. My name is Mark Simendinger. I'm the moderator of this panel, and I wanted to start out by introducing everybody that's up here on the panel, but probably should start out by introducing myself. I, years ago, was the president of Turfway Park Racetrack before we sold it to Keeneland back in the right around 2000. And I can remember when Donna Barton was starring as our leading jockey there. But also, subsequent to that time, served on the Kentucky Racing Commission, was vice chairman of the Racing Commission, and now I'm proud board member of the Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance, which is a tremendous organization. Also, before I get too far, I do want to say how proud we are in Kentucky of the work that Frank Taylor is doing. I'm from Kentucky, obviously. Everybody in Kentucky is aware of the program, and it really is an incredible program, and what he's doing is like really super selfless. And now we're getting to the more selfish part of the program with all of us trying to make money in the horse business. So without further ado, let me introduce the panelists. Lonny Powell is the CEO of the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association. And then David Richardson is the executive director of the Maryland Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association. To my left, John Moss. John is the executive director of the Iowa HBPA. And to his left, Damon Thayer. Damon Thayer owns Thayer Consulting, but also is a consultant right now to several states, but prior to that, maybe most notably, served over 20 years as in the Kentucky State Senate. And how many years as the Senate Majority Floor Leader?
12 years.
12 years as Senate Majority Floor Leader, in which he crafted and was the driving force behind many of the changes that have led to the success of Kentucky racing. But maybe most importantly, he's the only guy up here who has a bourbon brand, and soon coming to a state near you, I hope. Kentucky Senator Bourbon. It's actually a really great small batch bourbon if you're into that kind of thing. So I encourage you.
Thanks for the plug, Mark. Your commission check is in the mail.
So I thought what we would do in the panel is I'm going to ask each of these gentlemen to get up and give a little talk about what's going on in their state. They were chosen because we have a diversity of conditions that are happening in these states. So we've got Florida, we've got Maryland, Iowa, Kentucky, really kind of all over the map as far as what their business conditions are, how they're dealing with those things, and hopefully what we're going to be able to share with you today is not only what's going on in those states, but what the strategies are, and see if any of those strategies can apply to other states as well. So, David, why don't we start with you?
Sure.
And go ahead and give us the state of what's going on in Maryland right now.
Sure. Yeah. As Mark said, my name is David Richardson. I've been the executive director of the Maryland Thoroughbred Horsemen's Association since 2011. Since 2011, we've had a great opportunity in Maryland. We're really in a unique position in the state of Maryland that we're surrounded from other states, other racing jurisdictions, and that really puts us in a unique spot that the competition for horses in Maryland is fierce. It really is. So in 2011, 2012 timeframe, we really had to reinvent how we did business. You know, the old conventional way, the old conventional thinking just didn't work. We were in survival mode. So in that time frame, we entered into a 10-year agreement because in business, anyone that's in business, whether it's in the horse business, whether you're selling lemonade in a lemonade stand, you need stability. In order to thrive, you need stability. And in the racing industry, it's even more important because in order to invest in the racing business, in order to invest in a horse, you need long-term stability. And that's really what we didn't have in Maryland. So we struck a really unique partnership with the Strana Group and the Maryland Horsemen where we entered into this 10-year agreement. And we really viewed that from the Horsemen's perspective as a partnership. That we were business partners with the Strana Group. And we were able to provide that 10 years of stability for the industry. A few years ago, we got to the end of it, and we're at a crossroads. The Strana Group, they kind of changed what their focus would be. Frank had his own agenda when we first started, and Belinda was not quite the horse person that Frank was. But we didn't really look at the Strana Group as our enemy. We still looked at it as a partner. Okay, how are we going to attack some of these problems? And you know, we have to look at things creatively. We had to look at things with a blank slate. And that's kind of where we are right now. And you'll hear later today, Alan Foreman and our new general manager, or our president, Billy Knopf, he's going to give a presentation about kind of the capital plan and where we're going for the next 30 years. And it's really exciting. We really have an opportunity in Maryland to not only grow our industry, but rebuild our facilities and really create an environment that horsemen control for the most part, and we're still a partner. We're stakeholders in where we're going. So I think we have a good opportunity, and we're like I said, we're right on the precipice of some big things in Maryland. So we're thrilled. So.
All right, great. John, how about what's going on in Iowa?
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I want to take a quick point of personal privilege here. I really liked what Frank Taylor had to say today about stable recovery. I actually serve as interim president and chair for a couple of different boards with the HBPA and national HBPA. But one of the things I do want to emphasize is that we hear a lot about and he's done some great work with stable recovery. I just really want to give a big shout out to all my fellow HBPAs across the country with all the benevolence programs. The HBPAs were formed and formulated on a concept of pass the hat. And that's how we actually got started and organized. So I just want to say we spend a lot of time, a lot of energy, all my fellow affiliates that spend an enormous amount of time trying to get things done for the individuals that are having these personal issues when they're on the racetrack, and then trying to help them through those and try to get them assistance. It takes an entire community to do these types of things. I think Frank's doing some great work. Those guys are doing great work, but I want to really just say thank you to my fellow affiliates for continuing to do that. And that's also kind of part of the model that we're talking about when we're talking about the economics. Sometimes people do get wrapped up a little bit in, you know, when we're talking about purses and some of these things that we're doing in order to make it so that the owners can continue to actually have a successful product, to be able to try to retain some of the cash flow that they're spending on a continuous basis. But out of that process, we're also trying to take care of all these individuals, and that's where those monies and those funds come from, is from the purses. So it takes a village, it takes a community. We're all trying to work together to get these things accomplished, and the only way to do that is through these funding, is through these economic models that we're trying to put together. With that, specifically to Iowa, Iowa's very unique. I will sit here and argue with West Virginia a little bit about who was the first racino in the United States. My understanding is it was Iowa. I think they got their slot machines turned on a week before us, but I'm fairly certain we got our legislation passed first. That was back in 1995. But back in 1989, when they first started racing there, they were on some shaky ground. Prairie Meadows actually shut down for a year even because they couldn't quite make the model work when it came to just straight wagering. Iowa did not have a very robust group of individuals that knew what racing was in terms of the wagering product. So it didn't succeed on its own. So they came back. There was a number of individuals. One of them, Jim Rasmussen, had some great forethought, said we need to marry this together with a casino. We need to do something where we can create a partnership whereby we can create a good community relationship and do outreach not only for the racing industry but within our community. Prairie Meadows is one of, if not the only nonprofit, and I will emphasize this, nonprofit casino in not only the U.S. but the world. Their monies go back to the community in multiple different ways. They have 4 pillars of their organization. The one I'm here sitting here talking to you about today is the agricultural part and how that ties back in. But it's a very unique model. So from the get-go, we negotiated percentages, those types of things. We've lately had those percentages set by statute. Difficulty for Iowa is the fact that we were one of, if not the first, again, to try to establish what does this model look like. As time has gone on, others have taken this model and improved upon it, done very successful. I use Pennsylvania as an example. They came on board, I believe, back in 2005 is when they initially passed their legislation. And we went from, in Iowa state statute, it's 11% of adjusted gross revenues, to Pennsylvania, it was 18% of adjusted gross revenues, based on a formula where the local track paid 9%, and the standalone casinos, the Class A's, paid another 9% to equal 18% of what that regional track was doing. So there's been other models that have come along to help improve upon that. Us in Iowa, we're continuing to look at these different types of models. When sports wagering came around, again, we were unfortunately, to some degree, right on the forefront of the cusp of this. We were able to receive a percentage through the graces of the legislature for a percentage of net receipts out of sports wagering. But again, it was only within our track. We had 20 casinos, and this is not exaggeration. There are 20 casinos in the state of Iowa, 4 tribal casinos. No person, no resident in the state of Iowa is more than 40 minutes away from a casino in our state. I got 3.5 million people in my state. That is a lot of competition. So we're always under the stress and under this envelope of trying to figure out what can we do next, how can we improve ourselves. And right now we're in a little bit of a crossroads, just like many others. We've actually, I'll be remiss if I don't say it, we brought on Damon and Damon Thayer and Corey Johnson. We're hoping to bring some of that Kentucky magic over to Iowa and maybe sprinkle a little bit out of the round in order for us to get on a little bit better footing. Our purses are good, they're stable, but there are things that we believe we can do to try and increase that. So crossroads for us as well. Opportunities exist. We've had some studies done recently. I think many of you know Doug Reed produced a study, gave it to the Racing and Gaming Commission. The difficulty in some of these things is people like to cherry pick information. And you have to deal with that information in such a way that you're then trying to repurpose it and utilize it in a way that's positive for the industry and move it forward. So we're at a little bit of a crossroads right now, but we hope to have some improvement in things that we can do moving forward with our models.
Great. So 20 casinos and
20
how many million?
I think there's 3.5 million overall, maybe a little less.
Is anybody doing anything other than playing slot machines today in Iowa?
Yes, they actually get online with their apps and play a ton of sports wagering. An absolute eye-boggling amount. I was stunned. But yeah, that's about it.
Yeah.
They eat corn and then they go to the casino. So.
All right, Damon, would you give us an update?
Thanks, Mark. Apologize for my froggy voice. I'm still recovering from the 6:30 a.m. arrival on Monday morning from the fog-delayed flights that many of us experienced from Atlanta. I'm happy to be here. I want to thank Robert Hartman for inviting me. I hadn't been here in about 20 years. The last time I was here was when I was working at the Breeders' Cup, and my friends Brian Pettigrew and Fritz Witteman are here. We were all part of that brief, glorious time in American racing history when the Breeders' Cup and the NTRA had a joint operating agreement, and we actually had national marketing and PR and an office that promoted the sport on a national basis. But that's a topic for another forum. Maybe I'll get invited for that. Also, I'd like to rise to a point of personal privilege and note that Mark is my old boss at Turfway Park. I started working for him in 1992. So it's a good thing he's the moderator today because he's been moderating me ever since then. Also, one final point.
To certain levels of success, I might add.
We all do the best we can. Also, I'm going to talk about Kentucky today, but you all know that I'm working with the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative in Florida. We helped kill the decoupling bill. And I'd just like to say right out from the start, Lonny and I have a few minor differences on some internal process, but we are 100% aligned in our goal to defeat the decoupling bill in Florida. We all worked together as a part of a coalition, and we were 50-1 to kill that bill, and we killed it. And we're lined up once again and aligned to kill the decoupling bill when the Florida legislature convenes next month in Tallahassee. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands we are aligned, we are working together, and we have a great coalition, and we're going to beat that bill and save Florida racing. Now, on to Kentucky. As Mark mentioned, I was 22 years in the Kentucky State Senate. Took a break from my career in horse racing for a while to help move my adopted home state forward. And in 2020, we had been operating historical horse racing machines at some but not all tracks in Kentucky under regulatory authority and various court approval. When much to our shock, in September of 2020, the Supreme Court flipped its position. It had previously ruled that historical horse racing machines were legal. But much to our surprise, they decided they were for it before they were against it. And they laid down an order that said it required statutory approval of the General Assembly. Now, you got to understand the political situation in Kentucky. We are a deep red state with a very heavy Baptist population. Up until a few years ago, most Kentucky counties were dry when it came to alcohol sales. Now, that's changed. There's been a huge change in that, and that's a topic for a different panel as well. But it was going to be very difficult. We don't have casino gambling. We don't have slot machines. We don't have tribal gaming. And we knew we were confronted with an existential crisis because it was going to be very difficult to pass a bill legalizing historical horse racing. So we came up with a statute that included historical horse racing in the definition of parimutuel wagering. A simple change, but not a simple bill to pass. We had to craft a bipartisan coalition in both the House of Representatives and in the House, because we have and had at that time Republican supermajorities in both the House and the Senate. And we had a lot of opposition to HHR from a lot of rural Republicans. The suburban Republicans from Lexington, Louisville, Northern Kentucky, up where Turfway Park is located near Cincinnati, they were with us, but we had to recruit Republicans from the rural areas of Kentucky where there were no racetracks or track extensions, which you would know as OTBs, and we had to get enough Democrats to go with us and pass the bill. So what we did is we formed a huge coalition of all the owners groups, the breed groups, the KTA, KTOB, the HBPA, the Horsemen, the Jockeys Guild, the sales consigners, the sales companies, the racetracks themselves. I mean, if you can get all the racetracks in Kentucky to sing out of the same songbook at one time, that's a major accomplishment, and we were able to do that. And we worked very hard, got a great sponsor, my friend Senator John Schickel, who has Turfway in his district. And I like to say, victory has 1,000 fathers, failure is an orphan. That's one of JFK's favorite quotes, and one of mine as well. And it was a really heavy lift, but we got it done because of a coalition. My friend Adam Koenig is here today. He was a member of the State House at the time. He played a key role in getting it through the House of Representatives. It was a really close vote. We had a really close vote. But the key was when I had two of my Eastern Kentucky senators nowhere near a racetrack, nowhere near an OTB, and a lot of Baptist churches, and their preachers telling them not to vote for the bill. But they had seen the destruction of the coal industry in Eastern Kentucky by Obama-era policies that we have yet to recover from. And they approached me one day on the floor of the Senate, and they said, we're going to vote for your bill. We've already seen one signature industry go down because of the government. We don't want to see another one. And they took two courageous votes. Their names are Philip Wheeler and the late Johnny Turner, who unfortunately passed away last year. And those were the critical votes that helped put us over the top and get the historical horse racing bill passed. Later that year, I did an interview with Senator Schickel at Kentucky Downs on FanDuel. I think it was still called TVG at the time, and apologies to my FanDuel friends. I still sometimes call it TVG, but I still call X Twitter, so I'm stuck in my old-fashioned ways from time to time. And I predicted in September of 21 that we were 2 years away from Kentucky having the best year-round racing circuit in the country. And that's certainly come true. This past fiscal year, $59 million went into the Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund. That's money on top of association purses for Kentucky breds who run in Kentucky. The year after we passed HHR, we passed a tax bill that set a gross tax of 1.5%. And you mathematicians out there know that that's really about 30% of net. 1.5% of gross is about 30% of net. So it's a pretty fair tax rate. It's not a low tax rate, even though 1.5% sounds low, 30% does not. But we laid out in statute the various funds: Kentucky Thoroughbred Development Fund, Kentucky Standardbred Development Fund, education, where we fund thoroughbred, we fund equine programs at the University of Louisville, University of Kentucky, and at my friend Remy Bellick's program at the Bluegrass Community and Technical College. We fund aftercare. We fund management internships to help our workforce. All these things were set out in statute. And why were we successful? Because of relationships with legislators. And so the big point I want you all to leave with today is, if you live in the United States of America, everybody has two members of their legislature who represent you, except if you live in Nebraska, John's home state, because they have a unicameral legislature and only a Senate full of Republicans. Glorious. Sometimes I've thought about moving to Nebraska. But if you live in any of the other 49 states, you have one member in the lower house, one member in the upper house who represent you. If you care about the future of this industry, whose survival depends on the changing membership of legislatures and racing commissions, we live by statute and by regulation. You owe it to yourself to get to know your House member and your Senate member. And you owe it to yourself to go to your capital and set up an appointment and meet with them and talk about the importance culturally, economically, and agriculturally of the horse industry in your state or province, and then ask them to come to your farm or your blacksmith facility or your vet clinic or your shipping company or your racetrack to show them face-to-face, in person, the jobs that this industry creates. We need to stop apologizing for the fact that we are in the horse racing business. We should be proud of its cultural, agricultural, tourism, and economic effect on the economy across this country. We did it in Kentucky. I know a lot of you are envious of what we're doing in Kentucky, but I'll remind you that it wasn't very long ago that we were flat on our backs too, facing an existential crisis and wondering if we could even continue what we had at that time. It can be done in your state. I'm not saying it has to be replicated, but there are lessons to be learned, and I'm happy to be here today to talk about those, Mark.
That's great, Damon. Thank you. And I think the one thing that I'd like everybody in here to note is that Damon Thayer just quoted a Democratic president, John F. Kennedy.
The last useful Democratic president.
So please, if there's any media members here, please make sure that you highlight that.
Put it on Twitter.
We told you this would be a historic panel, and here you go. There you go. All right. Last but certainly not least, Lonny, please give us a description of what's going on in Florida, please.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Since I've audibled a couple different times on what I'm going to say, so I'm going to stick with the conversational format of all this because I think it's appropriate. I'll just start out so I can move on. I appreciate what you had to say there, Damon, and accepted. And you're right. Decoupling is the bad guy, if you will. And we've got to remember where decoupling started from. Now in Canada, it's not like it started from the government up in British Columbia. They can start a number of ways. And in Florida, what made it unique, right, is we had racetracks not wanting to race, or let's say racinos wanting to become enos. And a really different ball game when you have also the most powerful, influential tribe and gaming operation, not only in the country, but probably in the world, because when you think about the Seminole tribe, which really dominates almost 90% of the gaming landscape in Florida, I mean, they don't just own the hard rocks in the Miami area. They own the hard rocks worldwide. This is one of the world's most sophisticated tribes. It's one of the most sophisticated gaming operators. And they have a very big hand in Florida as well. Before I talk about Florida, I want to say a couple things about Arizona. I can't help it. For those of us that are graduates of this program or have anything to do with it, I got to tell you, it's very surreal to me to know that almost 43 years ago to this day, I came to my first one of these as a transfer junior pre-law student from the University of Idaho that was working on the starting gates in Idaho, and I was going to start working starting gates as a jockey valet here in Arizona. And I always laugh. My life, the things that happened in my life and in my career, I've done so many wonderful things and crazy things. It would be a book of fiction. It'd be rejected as a book of fiction, but it's been real. And I owe that to this program. So all of my career and a good part of my life and that of my family's. As a fifth generation, actually I'm a fourth generation Horseman. Proud to say I have a fifth generation. My daughter's here in this room. She runs a nonprofit called Horse Farms Forever. She's the executive director and accomplished show horse person. We've always taken our thoroughbred money and then lost it all in the show horse business. We do like all the other crazy horse people. And then I owe this to my father, who rode for 20 years. There's very few people left. Lafitte Pinkai talked about him a long time because Lafitte was my dad's guy. But my dad rode for 20 years and then was a Jockeys Guild manager for 25 years. He left home at 14 in California. Got recruited to ride the quarter horse match races, the Calcutta wagering, in the dry riverbeds on the Mexico-California border. And then he disappeared to Caliente, rode won 200 non-recognized races, went up to Santa Anita. On his first day of riding, he broke his maiden and got a second win. He broke every bone in his body before it was over. And even the Jockeys Guild, he traveled across the country representing the needs of the riders. And I remember when he was passing away, he was a new surgeon that had never met him before. And he asked me, what does this guy do for a living? He's got every bone in his body is broken. Everything is in my dead from the weight reduction and everything else that he went through back then. And I told him what he did, and he goes, this guy could have been 200 years old the way his constitution was. And I think that got passed on in my family lineage. And thank goodness to make a career in this industry. I thank him and I thank the University of Arizona program. You know, every day of my life is I'm in this business. I grew up on a playpen in the backstretch. I've done everything from the dirt to the horse, saddling the horses, to putting them in the gates. I've been a CEO since of almost every type of national and local organization since 90. And I've been talking to you all. This is my 41st symposium. I've presented at about 20. And I got to tell you, the last 2 years are finally those 2 years that our industry's always talked about all those years. When is the time going to come that we finally have to step up and take a stand? And when do we as an industry need to start looking at our own states, re-examining our alliances, our competitors, our friends? Those definitions can change because times have changed. Now in Florida, I think Damon gave you a good summary about this session. Since I've been at FTBOA, I think I've made about 4 or 5 presentations to you all the past 14 years. And I'll bet you 3 of them had decoupling in them. And son of decoupling, because let's face it, decoupling isn't just live racing separated from gambling. It's also no revenue sharing, okay? And there's different hybrids of it. And when I was in Louisville a couple weeks ago for the Jockey Club Toba event, and just what some of you told me last night and during a couple of my visits to industry visits to Saratoga, so many of you in your jurisdictions are hearing from lobbyists or politicians. You're hearing the dog whistles, the buzzwords that we heard 14 years ago upon my arrival that are going to lead to some type of major reduction potentially in your racing, pure decoupling, definitely revenue share revisits. And understand, I come here, you know, half my career I run racetracks. I will always be a racetrack guy, but I'll always be a jockey's son. I'll always be an assistant starter. I'll always be the head of this program. I'll always be the head of Racing Commissioners International. I'll always be with youbet.com. And I'll always be FTBOA. So I'm trying to give this to you from a collective perspective. You got to start listening what's going on and don't assume anything. And there are clues, and we probably aren't going to have time. I've got some ideas on clues. I also have some ideas on models that could work in your jurisdictions depending on the lay of the land. And I know I'm not the only one, and I don't know if we'll get to those. Quickly about decoupling in Florida going forward. There still has been no bill filed for 26. As Damon said, we're getting close. It doesn't have to be a straight-up bill. There's a lot of ways these things can happen. I've been doing overseeing government relations no matter what company I've been with for 35 years now. I've seen it all. I got to admit, in Florida, it's a contact sport. Our industry relations are a contact sport, and our politics are a contact sport. So we are prepared for everything and anything. And if it's a replication of last session, I don't need to say the word, but you know there's a definition. If you continue to do the same thing over and over again and get the same result, that equals something. Well, we've had no change in players. It's the same team politically. I would expect the same thing when we do our work. That doesn't mean you don't have to work hard, and there's a million permutations to this kind of stuff. But we should anticipate the same process, which was our very good friends, the Senate. And, you know, FTBOA, we've been around for 70 years. My lobby firm is represented for 30 years. I darn near live in Tallahassee. We have deep relationships. The Senate was not interested, and our governor on numerous occasions let it be known. But you can't assume anything. You can't assume. I've heard Damon say that before as a politician, and he's absolutely correct. So we're ready for everything, and it's more than that, depending on how the debate presents itself, because we also have to look at any type of movements on industry funding. And also, I can assure you from my perspective and my dealings with the very tops of the folks dealing with the First or the Stronach group, everybody needs to give up on the idea that you're going to force them to stay in the business of live racing. I take them at their word. I've been there with no handlers or anything else. They're in a rearview mirror, okay, at some foreseeable time in the future. So we have to think of an industry. Now, I'm sure the technology companies will flourish. And there's a lot of good people. I got a lot of great friends in these companies. But, you know, technology can diversify, and it just doesn't need the core live racing product. But as far as live racing, we need to move on. That doesn't mean that there's not responsibility that goes along with it, and certainly a needed transition time. I want to talk about one thing that is new. That's the first time I'm going to talk about in public, and it gives hope. The Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association in 2011 got the approval to own at the time a quarter horse permit that had a very narrow window to be converted to a thoroughbred, nonprofit thoroughbred permit. Shortly after my arrival, we got the conversion to the nonprofit thoroughbred permit. It had to be based in Ocala, a wholly owned subsidiary by FTBOA. It's not transferable, it's not leasable, you can't sell it. During 21, the year that we went all the way to the floor vote, and FTBOA stood by ourselves, no Horsemen, the track supported it. That was a big decoupling move, and I talked to you about it the next year. All these extra permits that weren't active in Florida were being eliminated as part of the new tribal compact and special session. Ours was the only one of the 12 or 14 because it was unique. It was thoroughbred, it was nonprofit. Because it's nonprofit, it's geared to build Breeders' Awards purses, equine research. Because it's nonprofit, it's not one for somebody that wants to flip it into real estate, which is one of the biggest challenges we've always had in this business. But now, listen, if your track owners or your state starts talking about how much your land is worth, red alert, red alert, red alert. And also you want to keep from becoming the next Eno that loses the race to it. These are all the things we got to think about. So, we've kept that permit on ice, and over the years, I know the economics of what it takes to build and run a racetrack or breeding program or a purse program. I'm not the only one, a number of folks do. We kept it on ice and said if the racetracks ever drastically reduce their live racing, or they try to decouple, and last year, let's make it official. A lot of people don't understand this, as Damon understands. It wasn't just Gulfstream. Tampa Bay did a dramatic amendment to the decoupling bill to add themselves to it on the first day of the House hearing. So both of our racetracks, no matter what else anybody says, and I wish it was different, they've all said we're going to decouple, okay, or we want to pursue it. And of course, then one even went as far as the courts, which is a whole other story, which tells you an awful lot about things. So we're going to get serious about this permit. We're no longer going to have it on ice. We got a lot of work to do, but it's the only permit allowed by law, because in South Florida, in order to try to replace a racetrack, unless you're at Gulfstream Park with that specific address, they had to pass initiatives back then. It's address specific. Hialeah is a decoupled quarter horse track. The owner gets to keep the slots without spending money on racing. What would be the motivation there? I mean, I was looking at South Florida racing over a year ago thinking that was going to be the solution, and you'd run into things like this. You can't just go move a racetrack and say, I'm going to move slots over. There's no racing permits. Ours is the only one, but it's based in Marion County. But guess what? That's the horse capital of the world, and we have more infrastructure there, pound for pound, than almost Lexington. I mean, training centers, barns, horses, proven breeding program. Other than Kentucky, we win more graded and open races than any other jurisdiction in this country. So, as of last week, on behalf of my association and of our nonprofit racing permit called Ocala Thoroughbred Racing, which I am also the CEO, we entered into a mutually exclusive multi-year agreement. It's the first time that this is being said in public with a Delaware registered entity, two principals. And the purpose of that entity, and these principals are folks that I know, folks that have become friends, and folks of extreme talent and intellect. And I'll tell you about them in a second, but the purpose of that entity is to team with us with our already legislatively approved in statute nonprofit thoroughbred racing permit to pursue the opportunity, including the incorporation of a third party, to build a modern new thoroughbred racing track and entertainment complex in Marion County. We have a lot of work to do, but this is a big step for us, and we wouldn't be doing it if we didn't think we didn't see a path, because we've had a plan, and I got reached out to by the visionary behind it all, who fell in love with Marion County after spending so much time in South Florida, just didn't know how to fill in the blanks on how the economics worked or some of the regulatory and so forth, but had that spark and that passion. And he's one of the principals. The two principals in this group, by the way, I should say, and one of them's with me today, is former Miami Beach Mayor Philip Levine. Philip, if you could just wave a hand. He's got the red hat. I told him he wanted to lose that hat because he'll have everybody running after him afterwards. Philip is a very successful hospitality and cruise exec, real estate investor. He's on the welcoming committee for the Soccer World Cup when it comes down to South Florida. He had no horses when I first met him. He's got a horse of virtually every breed. He rides from Clydesdales to walkers to everything else. He's just amazing. And he is the glue, because he had the vision, and we sat down and we talked about things. He researched and found me. I come back from Tallahassee one day, and every one of my media platforms had a contact from him. I'm going, who is this guy? Well, now I know who this guy is. This guy knows how to get people together. And he put us together with the second principle of the group. And by the way, Philip, thank you so much for your energy and vision. It goes both ways, for life, for life. Then guess who he brings to the table? This guy you probably only saw on TV 10 times today, or will before it's over. John Morgan of Morgan & Morgan, for the people. As those of you know, John Morgan, or if you don't know, operates the largest law firm of its kind in the world. He has over 1,400 attorneys. But he also loves the thoroughbreds. He has a bunch of them partners, mostly up in Lexington with Coolmore. He loves this business, and his family operates that firm at such great success. But I'll tell you what, he has a lot of other passion projects and things, and where I find him to be inspirational, and fortunate to call him friend. But if it weren't for Philip, we were actually, while things were going so rough in the house, Philip had already reached out to me, and under the radar, we were having informal conversations, and we just formalized that relationship this past week, and we're very excited about it, but obviously have a lot of work to do. We did this, it was just us, no handlers, no lobbyists, no lawyers, no other industry groups. This was all because of Philip, and we get three guys sit down at the table and say, how can we move this thing around? And we all bring different skill sets to the table, but we're also very like-minded. And that gives me hope and excitement. Obviously, it's a top priority to try to make this happen while doing all the things that we need to do in Tallahassee, as Damon talked and I talked. And I just think it's cool. It's cool to have hope and encouragement in the middle of all this. And I have some ideas about how some things might possibly work for you all if there is time. But thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Well, thank you, Lonny. And you know, if I'm ever given 5 minutes to live, I hope you're my doctor.
If ever I have a bourbon company, I hope you promote it up here while I'm speaking.
Take a drink, Larry. Here we go. Take a drink. Take a drink.
Well, that was quite an announcement. I wasn't prepared for that, so that was interesting. That's wow.
Mark, if I may,
Go ahead.
If you're okay with going kind of conversationally.
Please do.
I love the idea that the Horsemen are going on a racetrack. Frankly, that's something that has been talked about within the HBPAs for long term, and is what the Nebraska HBPA did many, many years ago. Those that are familiar with Exarban, when Exarban closed down, the Nebraska HBPA stepped up to the plate and created the Horsemen's Park out there in Omaha. They've now recently acquired and worked with, and they're now starting slot machines and getting their own up. But the concept of Horsemen actually owning racetracks seems to be something that it's been a long term, it's a slow progression. Even when I worked with the Pennsylvania HBPA, we even had discussions at one point in time of potentially acquiring a racetrack in a few other different jurisdictions. So those concepts are out there. It seems to be the model that may, in fact, be the most sustainable for the industry when it comes to horsemen. Just because of the fact that, and I'm going to be honest with you, we're up here representing horsemen's groups. We're constantly at odds with the individuals that are providing the product to the people, but it's us as the horsemen that generate that product. And we do have minimums that we need in order for us to maintain the product, meaning the backsides, the racetracks, the breeders, without all these groups working together, and it all comes back to one individual group that we represent, and that's the owners. Without the owners of these horses, we're not putting anything on. And those individuals need to be able to retain and make back as much of their money as they possibly can, because that's what allows the majority of this industry to continue to operate. If you don't have a product that you can wager on, yeah, nothing. And
I think it's also interesting that we're sitting up here, Lonny's proposal here, if I've got that correct, it's a nonprofit license, is that right?
That's correct, and nonprofits or government-owned or partnered or industry broad stakeholder ownership of some sorts, those all seem to be the avenues, to John's point and where you're going. I think we'd all agree that are kind of the future.
Well,
yes.
That's what I was going to talk about, is David's situation.
I mean, and that is the future. We were kind of the pioneer with that. The toughest part from the horseman's perspective is it really takes a different view. You can't look at this as a horseman's view. You've got to look at this as kind of the steward of the whole ecosystem of the industry. And that's kind of where you know, it took us a while to learn that you know, the interest of the racetrack itself isn't always the interest of the horsemen, isn't always the interest of the breeders, but you've got to find a way to stop these generational divides that we've had in this industry, and you've got to start with a blank slate, and that's really what we've done in Maryland. It wasn't without some growing pains. It wasn't without people clinging to the past and clinging to the, you know, the old way of doing business. But you've got to reinvent your problem solving and the way that you problem solve, and it can be successful. And as I said, we're on the precipice of that, securing our VLT subsidy for the next 30 years. Rebuilding Pimlico, having a first-class training center, and being able to implement our ideas to grow the industry. So the first step is changing your mindset and stop with the age-old debates that have always just infected this industry. So
I think it's interesting that we've got some governmental-owned nonprofit types, but then we've also got Kentucky, which is very much for-profit. Last time I checked, Churchill Downs was trying to make some money, doing a pretty good job of it. But I also have to ask you, Damon, I got to ask you to comment on what you just heard about Florida as well.
Well, I subjected myself to Trump's acceptance speech at the convention last year, and I thought that was long. That was a long opening statement, Lonny. Man.
You know what? I have to admit, in all honesty, I forgot about all of a sudden opening, and I just flowed.
I think we all know that.
I
think everybody knows that.
But at least it was quality. Yeah, but I did.
It was kind of the worst kept secret. I mean, Lonny's been telling everybody this week that he had a big announcement to make, and based on recent statements from FTBOA about the license, I mean, that's clearly a valuable commodity. To make anything, and it's exciting. But to make anything happen in Florida, it's going to have to be multilateral. It can't be unilateral. I mean, you got to involve the Florida HBPA, the Tampa HBPA, Ocala breeder sales companies. A lot of the people who are in the Tri-Coalition that we formed are going to want to know about this. Van owners, blacksmiths, veterinary firms. And the big question is, you know, how much is it going to cost? Where's the money going to come from? So I have a little announcement that I'll make myself, and I won't take 30 minutes to do it. In the next 2 weeks, our coalition...
tested it already, man.
What's that?
You know how many people came here, they thought we'd have a stock car race and run into the wall? You disappointed them when you said the good things, for gosh sakes.
Oh, come on, I'm just a big old teddy bear. Come on, man.
We're at opposite ends for a reason. Thank you.
And I am at the far right from your point of view, and that's appropriate. In the next 2 weeks...
You should be off the stage if that's the way we were doing it.
Hey, come on, I'm a modern Reagan conservative now.
Okay.
there's still room for me on the stage. We'll make a comeback someday. In the next 2 weeks, the Thoroughbred Racing Initiative, in conjunction with our partners at the Florida HBPA, will be releasing the results of a year-long study by the Crossroads Consulting Group and Populous. They recently did a similar study for Maryland. Billy Knopf knows them well. They have taken a complete look at the Florida industry and done a feasibility study for us, and we'll be releasing those results in the next couple of weeks before Christmas time. And it will lay out options for the state of Florida. Last year, when I was in Tallahassee, I've got some friends in the Florida legislature from my years involved in a national legislative group called GOPAC. I talked to them, and they said, look, what if we kill this bill? I said, well, I need you to kill this bill, and here's why, and explained why. And I said, but we will come with options. We will come with solutions. And so we put our money up along with our friends at the FHBPA, and we're going to lay out several potential pathways forward for Florida, and perhaps this can be part of a multilateral approach with the nonprofit model that Lonny's talking about. I'm just now reading through the study. I think a racetrack in Ocala is a very viable solution.
And Damon, you bring up a good point too. Our project in no way is designed to preclude an economically viable track in South Florida. And you're also absolutely right. No matter what, it's got to be economically viable. It's got to be purse competitive. Now, one thing I will say, you know where your best location is in your state if you want to do something new like this? It's wherever the money is to build the place, which is a whole different way of defining how we used to look at things. But on the decoupling issue and on we are going to be getting together to talk about bigger picture things. We definitely are still all for, the best location would be Gulfstream, for gosh sakes, if the price could be right. But South Florida, that's just going to probably be a lot more complicated, but in no way are we...
I'm loath to interrupt you, but you did me, so I'm going to jump back in to finish the point that I was going to make. The question is, just like anything, where's the purse money going to come from?
Exactly.
We've got, and you know, there are plenty of examples in the 38 states across America on where the purses come from. That's the question. The other thing is, I'm in agreement. I want to do everything we can to save racing at Gulfstream Park. Or, conversely, save racing in South Florida. I got my start in Detroit at the old Detroit race course. No racing there anymore. Boston, no racing there anymore. New England, no racing there anymore. San Francisco, no racing there anymore. Portland, Oregon, no racing. Vancouver, British Columbia. We are systematically seeing the destruction of racetracks in cities across America. And how in the hell are we going to make future fans to go to our ADWs and bet on this sport where 95% of our parimutuel revenue comes from if we don't have racetracks in America's greatest cities where we all became fans? We all have the stories of how we became fans by going to a racetrack with a member of our family. And I don't want Miami, one of America's greatest cities, whether they deserve to be in the college football playoff or not. Miami is one of America's greatest cities, and it has a huge horse racing history there. And I'm committed to do whatever can be done as part of our coalition to save racing in South Florida. But I do think Ocala can be a part of the puzzle.
All right, well, we could go on and on and on for all this for quite a while. I would like to take about 5 minutes here if anybody has any questions from the audience. Yes, sir. There should be a mic. Is there a mic, Robert, anywhere? Oh, there we go. Sorry about that.
A short guy from Miami. First of all, I'm Philip Levine, and I'm honored to be here. And Senator, you're a great speaker. I'm a former mayor. We have a leg up on everybody else here, because once you're in elective office, my God, that's a crash course in how to speak to audiences. So let me just say that. As far as horse racing being Republican or Democrat, I could tell you one thing. If I was in a race, I wouldn't want to be on an elephant, and I would not want to be on a donkey. I'd rather be on a horse, okay? Because the one thing horses do is they go straight ahead. They show progress. They're determined. They're forceful. They're deliberate. That's a better way of thinking about the industry. Now, let me say the other thing. I know nothing about your industry. I'm learning like crazy. But the one thing I've seen is, my God, this industry is definitely made up of different horses. Because you all compete against each other. You don't run together. And I look at this industry and I say, if you don't start running together, there will not be an industry in the future. It's a fabulous industry. You have a guy in this industry, I've never met him before, but he seems to say a lot of things that make a lot of sense. Some of you probably hate him, some of you love him. He's kind of like a Trump of your industry. That's that guy, Mike Rapoli. But he certainly says things that when I hear him, it dawns upon me. I'm an entrepreneur. I built the Four Seasons cruise line. I built real estate companies. People say, why should you have a racetrack in Ocala? Well, you know what? When they caught John Dillinger in the 1930s, they asked him, Mr. Dillinger, why do you rob banks? And you know what he said? Because that's where the money is. So when you say, why are you going to have a horse track in Ocala? Guess what? That's where the thoroughbreds are. Now, I agree with you, Senator. It would be fantastic to have a racetrack in Miami. Hialeah, Gulfstream, it would be wonderful. I agree with you. If you can change the laws and allow that to happen, that'd be fabulous. And I think that's a great piece of the overall puzzle. But it's a little bit challenging in the state of Florida, knowing the politics. Now, my partner, John Morgan, he's also Kentucky bred. He's from Kentucky.
I know, I hear his commercials
all the time. You know that, right?
time.
So you know about that. So Kentucky bred is great. And I know, I can tell you, Lonny, you take a lot of arrows. You've been up there fighting the fight. I hear about it from my friends in Tallahassee. No one likes the guy that fights the fight. The guy that fights the fight has all the arrows in his back. This guy's walking around with more arrows in his back than you could possibly imagine, because he's been fighting the fight for this industry. So all I could say is this, is that this is a great opportunity. I think it's something that could move forward. And I think, like Lonny said, and I think, Senator, you said, everybody has to work together so that this does not become some kind of Jurassic industry, that it moves on to the future. So thank you.
Philip. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else that has any questions for the panelists up here?
While we're waiting for another question, I wanted to make another point. I am thrilled about the government investing $500 million in New York and Maryland. Those two states are critical to the North American racing ecosystem. But I do want to point out that in Kentucky, all the money that's been invested in our facilities has come from the private sector. Churchill Downs has invested, love them or hate them, over $1 billion in our racetracks and OTBs in Kentucky. And those facilities are driving handle and HHR that are leading to our huge purses. Keeneland, I see Gatewood Bell here, over $90 million for their new paddock, dining rooms, and the thing I'm really excited about, a rooftop bar. Kentucky Downs, Ron Winchell, Mark Falcone, the investment they've made in that facility, plus 2 OTBs and a new harness track, tremendous. So I'm proud that we've got private sector investment in horse racing.
Okay. Last word right here, John. You get it.
Wow, well, it's not going to be that impressive. But I was just going to say in so much as I think it's a very interesting concept. I mean, we have nonprofits. Obviously, we need the profitability. I didn't want to get too far off the track of the fact that we have different models. It depends on your environment. I guess it really does come down to this. Everything's specific to your area, your region, your state, your country. What's going to work for you? How's that going to work out? You got to have the knowledge. I really want to emphasize what Damon said earlier, too. We almost could have ended in terms of what the topic was. You need to get to know your legislatures. That's the only impact you're going to have. Without that governmental backing, we have nothing. And I really do want to thank the rest of the people on my panel here, the other speakers, and Mark, thank you very much for taking the time, and thank the Racetrack Industry Program for allowing us to have this conversation. I know we devolved a little bit off into, I think, Florida South, but otherwise, I think
that's half the fun.
That was half the fun. So,
all right, thanks everybody.